Scotland and whisky are inseparable. The golden spirit has been distilled here for centuries, but today it's more than just a drink. It's a billion-dollar industry that fuels the Scottish economy, employs thousands, and influences global markets. Whisky isn't just about tradition and heritage, it's an economic powerhouse, generating over $6.1 billion annually and making up a quarter of all UK food and drink exports. But how did whisky become one of Scotland's most valuable economic assets? What makes it such a highly profitable industry, and what challenges does it face moving forward? Today, we're diving deep into how whisky shapes Scotland's economy, from its centuries-old legacy to its global dominance, the role of tourism, and its future in an increasingly competitive market. Let's get started. Whisky's origins in Scotland stretch back over 500 years, with the first recorded mention appearing in 1494 in the Exchequer Rolls of Scotland. It refers to a friar named John Core, who was given malt to produce whisky for King James IV. But the roots of whisky making are even older. Some believe that monks brought distillation techniques from Ireland or mainland Europe centuries earlier, adapting them to the barley and pure water found in Scotland's rugged landscape. For centuries, whisky remained a rural, small-scale craft, made primarily by farmers who distilled their surplus grain to avoid spoilage and for personal consumption. Unlike today's sophisticated aging processes, early whisky was unaged and rough, often consumed immediately after distillation. By the 17th and 18th centuries, whisky's popularity had grown significantly, but with that growth came government intervention and taxation. In 1644, Scotland's Parliament introduced the first tax on whisky production, sparking a wave of illicit distilling and smuggling. By the late 1700s, it was estimated that more than half of Scotland's whisky production was illegal, with distillers operating in the Highlands under cover of night to evade tax collectors. The turning point came in 1823, when the Excise Act was passed, allowing distillers to legally produce whisky under a licensing system. This law laid the foundation for Scotland's whisky industry as we know it today. By the mid-1800s, whisky had firmly established itself as Scotland's signature industry, and a major transformation took place: the rise of blended whisky. Up until this point, whisky had been largely potent, heavily peated single malts. But blending whisky with grain spirits made it smoother, lighter, and more accessible. The expansion of British colonial trade routes allowed whisky to spread rapidly across the world. It became particularly popular in India, Canada, and the United States, where British officers, traders, and settlers embraced the drink. By the late 19th century, brands like Johnnie Walker, Chivas Regal, and Dewar's were leading whisky's global expansion. Despite 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and Prohibition in the US, whisky managed to not only survive, but thrive. And today, it remains one of Scotland's most valuable exports. But just how much does whisky contribute to the economy? Let's take a closer look. Whisky isn't just a drink, it's one of the most profitable spirits in the world. Today, Scotland exports whisky to over 180 countries, making it a key driver of the national economy. In 2022 alone, Scotch whisky exports reached $7.5 billion. This means that every single second, Scotland exports 42 bottles of whisky. To put that into perspective, whisky generates more revenue than Scotland's seafood, dairy, and meat industries combined. The United States is the biggest consumer of Scotch whisky, with annual imports exceeding $1.2 billion. France, despite its association with wine and cognac, imports more Scotch whisky than any other spirit, with over 200 million bottles consumed annually. Meanwhile, China and India are seeing explosive growth in whisky consumption. In China, whisky is viewed as a luxury status symbol, often given as a gift or displayed in business meetings. In India, where whisky already dominates the alcohol market, Scotch is increasingly seen as a premium product, driving imports to record highs. The shift towards premium whiskey has made Scotch even more lucrative. Some bottles, particularly aged single malts from distilleries like Macallan and Dalmore, have appreciated in value by over 500% in the past decade. A single bottle of Macallan 1926 Fine and Rare recently sold for $1.8 million USD, proving that whiskey isn't just a drink, it's a high-value investment commodity. Despite this success, whiskey faces economic challenges. Trade tariffs, Brexit-related complications, and fluctuating consumer trends can impact exports. Yet, Scotch whiskey has proven remarkably resilient, adapting to new markets and shifting consumer preferences. But whiskey's economic impact isn't just about exports. It's also a huge driver of Scotland's domestic economy, especially in terms of jobs and tourism. Scotland's whiskey industry directly and indirectly supports over 42,000 jobs, making it one of the country's largest private sector employers. These jobs aren't just in distilleries, they span across farming, logistics, glass manufacturing, cooperatives, marketing and tourism. Whiskey tourism has become a multi-million-pound industry, with over 2 million visitors travelling to Scotland each year for whiskey experiences. Distilleries in Speyside, Islay and the Highlands have become major tourist destinations, attracting visitors from around the world. Beyond tourism, whiskey plays a crucial role in Scottish agriculture. The industry supports thousands of barley farmers, with 500,000 tonnes of Scottish barley used annually in whiskey production. The byproducts of whiskey distillation, such as spent grain, are repurposed as livestock feed and biofuels, reinforcing whiskey's role in sustainability and circular economy efforts. But as whiskey production increases, so does the need for innovation and sustainability. The industry is evolving, and the way it adapts will determine its long-term economic impact. As whiskey production scales up to meet growing global demand, the industry faces an increasing responsibility to adopt sustainable practices. Traditional whiskey making requires large amounts of water, energy, and natural resources. And with environmental concerns rising, distilleries are now adapting to greener methods. One of the biggest environmental challenges in whiskey production is energy consumption. The distillation process requires intense heat, traditionally generated by burning fossil fuels. However, many distilleries are now investing in renewable energy sources. For example, Glenfiddich has introduced a system where whiskey byproducts are converted into biogas, which is then used to power distillery vehicles. Diageo, one of the largest whiskey producers in the world, has committed to carbon neutrality across all its distilleries by 2030. Another sustainability issue is water usage. A single distillery can use over 50 litres of water for every litre of whiskey produced. To combat waste, distilleries are implementing closed-loop water recycling systems, ensuring minimal wastage and environmental impact. Some, like Bruichladdich on Islay, even source their water locally and carefully monitor extraction to avoid harming natural ecosystems. Sustainable packaging is another growing trend. With whiskey often packaged in heavy glass bottles and elaborate wooden boxes, many brands are shifting toward lighter, eco-friendly materials to reduce carbon footprints. The Scotch Whisky Association has introduced an industry-wide sustainability initiative, aiming for all whiskey packaging to be 100% recyclable by 2025. Beyond environmental sustainability, the industry is also innovating new aging techniques and flavour profiles. Traditionally, whiskey is aged in ex-bourbon or sherry casks, but distilleries are now experimenting with casks previously used for wine, rum, and even Japanese Mizunara oak. These variations create new, unique flavour profiles, allowing whiskey brands to appeal to a younger, more adventurous audience. Another area of innovation is technology in whiskey production and sales. With the rise of blockchain technology, some companies are using digital tracking to verify the authenticity of rare whiskies, preventing counterfeiting and fraud in the high-value whiskey market. Digital ownership is also gaining traction, with collectors purchasing rare casks as NFTs, non-fungible tokens, essentially buying whiskey before it's bottled, securing an asset that could appreciate in value. As sustainability and innovation reshape the industry, whiskey is not only preserving its heritage, but also evolving for future generations of consumers. However, there's another challenge on the horizon: global competition. Can Scotland maintain its dominance as the world's whiskey capital? For centuries, Scotland was the undisputed leader in whiskey production. But today, it faces intense competition from emerging whiskey-producing nations, each bringing its own unique spin on the craft. Japan, for instance, has rapidly become one of the world's most respected whiskey producers. Japanese distilleries like Yamazaki, Hibiki, and Nikka have won multiple international awards, with their precision-focused, delicate flavors appealing to both traditionalists and new whiskey drinkers. Unlike Scotch, Japanese whiskey often features Mitsunara oak aging, which imparts subtle sandalwood and spice notes. The United States, historically known for bourbon and rye whiskey, has also seen major growth in single malt production, with brands like Balcones and Westland gaining international recognition. American distilleries are experimenting with non-traditional grains and accelerated aging techniques.